Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Whether you are a sales professional, not in sales but interested in helping people solve problems, or a founder, CEO who is looking to grow your business, you'll find practical tools, stories, and experience you can apply to your role. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Mike Simmons, co-founder of Catalyst Sale. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Jody.
Mike, you may remember when we did the episode about working in a siloed organization, we said there was one topic we'd come back to. Do you remember what it was?
I don't. What was it?
We said we'd talk more about how do you know when to leave, when it's time to leave an organization.
Very good. An important topic. I've made this mistake a number of times. I mean, I can tell you, looking back on the different jobs I've had in my career, I have never found one where I've looked back and said, wow, I wish I would have stayed there for a couple of more months or a couple more years. I've never done that. I've always looked back and said, wow, I could have left about a year earlier or 6 months earlier, maybe even 18 months earlier.
Now, I have to admit, I am guilty here. I've stayed way too long at jobs, whether it's because it's comfortable, whether because I'm loyal. That's true. The last job, regular job I had, I probably stayed long. I outgrew the job. Looking back, I realize that now. And I could have left quite a bit sooner, but I was just too loyal. I really enjoyed the company owner and I was loyal to him and I wouldn't leave. As a park ranger, as much as I like being a park ranger, I stayed probably 2 years longer than I should have. And I just look at different jobs that I had and it really is, even if a situation is tough, it's hard to leave because you're in it, you know it, there's people involved. It's really hard. So I think we could help. You could help here, Mike, to help us identify when we should leave our position or leave an organization.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good conversation. And I think I've shared this before, but two of my bigger downfalls have been ego and loyalty. Either letting my ego get in the way of decisions, good, bad, or indifferent, or loyalty get in the way of me taking action, staying too long. So happy to talk through it. And like most things, it starts with a couple of questions. Like, are you learning? Do you continue to learn in the new role? If you're not continuing to learn new things in the new role, if you're not forced to stretch or push yourself harder in that existing role, it might be time for you to move on. Now, moving on could be moving into a new opportunity inside the same organization. I was fortunate when I worked at O'Reilly, I had multiple jobs over an 8-year career there, and they different levels of responsibility. I had people reporting to me. I went through periods of time where I didn't have anybody reporting to me. I worked on indirect channels, worked on direct channels, and left as the VP of sales, or the VP of Americas when I left the role. And so O'Reilly provided some really good opportunities for me to expand into different roles. Rewind 2 jobs before that, I was at UPS for 7 years, and I had 3 jobs at UPS in that 7-year period. And really, if you were to go down to the foundational pieces of it, it was probably 2 jobs. I was a loader, unloader, and had different roles when I first started. I was basically an hourly employee, and then moved into a part-time supervisory role and then a full-time operations management specialist. So I guess that was 3. But yeah, if you're not feeling the need to stretch, if you're not really getting excited, if you don't wake up and say, wow, I'm really excited about going out and doing the thing that I need to do for the organization that I'm working for or in the role that I'm in, it might be time.
I think the hardest job to leave is one where things are good. It's not great. It's not bad. Things are good, but maybe you're not learning. Maybe you're not stretching. Maybe there's not room for advancement, but it's comfortable enough. I think that one it's almost a trap that nobody sees coming because things are good. You know, why would I mess this up? When you have the opportunity to be great, you just probably won't get there where you are now. How would we know? Maybe this taps into what you've already said, but Mike, how would we know that we're in that trap of settling for good when great is out there somewhere?
Well, Jody, as you started saying that, one of the things that came to mind was coasting. When things are good, you're kind of coasting. Think about, coasting on a skateboard, or coasting if you're walking out of Costco and you jump on the back of the grocery cart and coast your way through the parking lot. Things are kind of good there, and they feel good. But the reality around coasting is you're likely going downhill. So if you're coasting, look at it and start to ask that question: why am I coasting? Why am I not having to put a lot of effort into this? Why are things just kind of good? And how can I make this great? How can I do something different? And you might be in a season in your life where coasting is okay. There's just so much other stuff going on where you've decided good is good because I need to put my mind share, my time and my effort and my energy into this other place. But if everything is good, you may want to initiate some change and see what ways you can make things better. So if you're coasting, it might be time.
I think that's good. And being self-aware enough to realize that you're coasting, that's a valuable skill to have, rather than just go through the same routine every day and not notice or not care. But you know what? If you're fine with that, maybe staying at a place where a job is good and comfortable, that's fine. But Mike, I don't think anybody that listens to the Catalyst Sale podcast is fine with good when they could be great.
Yeah, I hope not. And this comes from a podcast where we're talking about listener questions. So if you have questions or you have thoughts or you want to engage, send us a note. Let us know how you apply these ideas that we talk about, because it's one thing to talk about them. It's a completely different thing to put them into practice and start executing and start making that impact. Jody, as you were talking there, another red flag for me, and this kind of gets into the self-awareness piece, but another red flag for me is, do I ever feel like I'm in that old Dunkin' Donuts commercial, time to make the donuts, time to make the donuts, and then the dude who's supposed to go out and make the donuts runs into himself at his front door, and the person on the other side said, I made the donuts. If you find yourself in that kind of rotation where you're not really leaning on the mind share that's necessary, then it may also be time for you to make a change. And that change could be identifying new ways to innovate in a given role inside your organization. It could mean expanding responsibilities or getting exposure, asking your boss if you can participate in another team meeting or participate in some other activity that's going on in the organization that you find interesting. This creates a potential for you to have diversity in experiences and engagement. We've talked about sales as a thinking process. We also talk about sales for non-sales professionals and how folks outside of a sales role can apply a number of the concepts we discuss on this podcast. Well, if you go through and you do some job shadowing with someone in product, or engagement with somebody in marketing, or get involved in a team meeting with someone in the customer support area, think about the feedback you can share from your experience in your role with them and how it might be able to help them in their job, but also think about the feedback you can get from them in the job that they're doing today and how it might actually help expand what you're doing in your role. Now, if you go to your boss and you ask that question and you find out that those are not opportunities that exist inside the organization, that might be another indicator that you may have served your purpose inside that company and it's time for you to move on.
I want to take us to another situation where it might be time to move on. I said it's difficult to leave when the situation is good, when it's comfortable, but it could be better. That's a tough one because you feel, why mess it up? It's pretty good.
Yep.
The other, well, there's more than one, but the next is when things are bad. I've been in this situation where things were bad and I should have left, and I didn't because I kept thinking, well, this will impact my family if I leave this job, and things are bound to get better. It's not going to stay like this forever. It can't. It's bound to get better, and I'll just hold on a little while and be persistent and see what I can learn. And to be honest, I've started off saying I'll see what I can learn, and eventually I just even stopped learning and just kept going through the motions. So if we're in that position where we're in a job that's not good, whether it's because of environment, bad supervisor, who knows what, but we're in a position that is just not good. How do we know it's time to leave, that we're better off breaking free from this rather than staying?
Yeah. I mean, if you get caught in that trap of this too shall pass, or if you don't like the weather in Hawaii, wait 10 minutes and it'll change, or in Orlando, wait 10 minutes and it'll change, you might find yourself on that treadmill where you're just kind of doing a lot of work, perpetually moving, but you're not actually moving forward. So I think, similar to what you were talking about before, which is a self-assessment of the situation and saying, what am I doing? What could I be doing better? What could I be doing different? How much of this is just the way that the organization is? How much of this is a function of culture? Yeah. When I was at UPS, I remember just getting super stressed out about the time for when you would depart a jet, because we're working. And if anybody has seen the Tom Hanks movie Castaway, in the first part where they talk about they've got the Federal Express thing that's going on, and they're worried about the clock. That was real life for us in the air operation at UPS. And we knew that flight 849 had to block or had to release out of the blocks at a certain time, or flight 857 had to release out of the blocks at a certain time. And each minute that it was late cost the organization X number of dollars. Now, intuitively, I would think, well, they can make up some of that time in the air. So I didn't really understand that completely about why that timing was so important. Wasn't it better to get that last couple of packages on there? So I would get really stressed out about this stuff, and we would come up with different ways and different Gantt charts and different organization things and logistics discussions about how we would address it. Well, I left UPS, joined a company called SmartForce. I was at SmartForce for about a year, maybe 2. I forget the exact timeline. It might have even been 3. And by that point, we had our first child, and I brought him to the air operation so that he could see the planes going in and out. And I could say hi to a couple of people I'd worked with a number of years back. And I realized they were going through the same stuff, like the stuff that would keep me up at night and get me so excited about what I was doing, and would take so much time and energy and get me to the point where I would talk in my sleep during Christmas season, during peak season. They were still dealing with the same issues years later. And that was an eye-opening experience for me to say, don't get stuck. Don't stay in that thing too long. Take advantage of the opportunities to learn about the scenario that you're working through and look for what's next. Look for that next opportunity. And when you look for that next opportunity and you open it up for yourself, you actually open up that position that you were in for somebody else, and then they can put their stamp on it. So even in those bad situations, don't stick around them too long thinking, hey, this too shall pass and things will get better if I just hang on. Take that as a cue that maybe it's time to make a change.
Okay, I've got one more situation for you, Mike, and this might be the scariest of all of them. And that is when you should leave just to get different experience. You may be at a job that you thoroughly enjoy, maybe you're paid well, but in order to reach your career goals and ambitions, you just need a little bit different experience that you're not going to get where you're at. And this may be hard to identify. I know it's hard to execute on, but give us a sense there. How do we know we're in that situation where it may be time to leave just to get different experience?
Yeah, I think this ties into some of the stuff that we've talked about. And I hope for everybody we're not getting redundant, and that would be great feedback too, just to hear feedback about, are we getting into enough detail on these things, or are we not getting into enough detail on it? But I think in any of those scenarios where I feel like I've learned everything that there is to learn about that individual role, I've seen every challenge that there is to have about that I'm faced with, I'm starting to recognize and identify patterns that are repeating themselves over and over and over again. And I can start to create some predictability in those outcomes. I can start to predict what's going to happen next, or what the challenge is that's going to happen next. I think that becomes an indicator that maybe I'm not pushing myself as hard as I could be. And maybe now there's time for me to gain exposure doing something else I think you can, remember, you can always come back. Like when we started Catalyst Sale, one of the conversations I had with Jen was, worst case scenario, I just go back and get a sales job. I could always do that. There's a skill set that I've had and that I've cultivated over this time in selling products or solutions into organizations where I can go back and I can do that. So if you're at Burger King and you're working the point of sale cash register and you'd like to get some experience doing something else in another role, do that. You can always go back and work at point of sale if that happened to be your calling. You can always go back. It may not be the same situation, but just because you make a decision to change doesn't mean that you're beholden to that decision to change forever.
I've brought up 3 different situations where we may be at a place where it's time to go and we need to recognize it and act on it. Mike, is there any I've missed, any other situations you can think of where it may be time to leave a job?
If you don't feel good about it, like if you don't feel like you're making an impact, I think it's time for you to start exploring other options. If you don't feel like you're giving back to the place that you're working with or to your customer base, or you're no longer serving them with a level of excitement that you had when you first started doing the work, if you can't find ways to enter that beginner's mind space, it might be time to evaluate your situation and think about where else you might be able to take your skill set. Doug Boucher on one of his podcasts, and he's got the Learning Innovations podcast, and one of these days we'll have Doug on, but he talks about innovation in the context of the America's Cup. And it took having someone with a background in bicycles to make a significant shift to a certain team's sailboat by having them move from a hand crank to a foot crank. Think about how you can take your lens, your experience, and apply it into another role and how much innovation you might be able to deliver there. Now, constantly be stretching yourself and take advantage of those opportunities.
I have 2 more points I want to make, Mike, before we wind down. First is that we live in a wonderful world right now with more opportunity probably than ever before. And if you want to live in Duluth, Minnesota, you can just pack up and go to Duluth, Minnesota. You're not bound to a geographic area like maybe we would have been in the past. I just think there's so much opportunity out there that I want to add that as another situation where maybe it's time to leave a job. That if there's a place you've always wanted to live, you can do it now. You can relocate. You're not bound geographically like we may have been in the past. I've got one more point, Mike, but is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think it's really important to know you've got flexibility. You just have this flexibility. You can work anywhere. I mean, like I work out of the 12-foot by 12-foot office in the town of Gilbert. And sometimes I'm in Gilbert, and sometimes I'm at our office in Scottsdale, and sometimes I'm getting off an airplane and meeting with clients in New York or in San Francisco or Texas, Boston, or Florida. I mean, there's so much flexibility. You're no longer bound to going into an office. Now, keep in mind, it takes a certain mindset to be comfortable with that kind of transition. And maybe we'll talk about that on a future podcast. We'll have these just build on each other, but talk about that mindset of what does it take to make that transition to work from home versus when you've worked in an office environment for years. But Jody, that was the only thing I'd add to that point that you brought up.
Yeah, and your addition was good because I live in a town of 10,000 people on the edge of the continent over here in Washington State. But yet, in just the past couple of months, I've been in Orlando, Austin, Indianapolis, Nashville, all for business. It just doesn't matter anymore. You can be wherever you want to be. Now, the last point, and I purposely saved this for last. If you decide that now is the time to leave or the time to start looking to leave, that you can't coast. You can't coast on the way out. You can't mail it in. You've got to continue to do the best you can at the job you have until you are completely out the door. What do you say about that, Mike?
Jody, I think that is a critical point. Everybody out there, you've made a commitment to the person that you work for, the people you work with, the organization you're a part of, the team you're a part of. make good on that commitment throughout the process. Don't coast. Don't pack it in. Don't mail it in. Continue to keep that level of engagement, just as if you were going to stay there for another 3 or 4 years. And the benefit of that is while you're doing that, you may realize while you're going through the interview process that, hey, maybe things really are good. Maybe there are more opportunities in that organization that you're with. But if you start to become one of those people who has, we would talk about it, short-time disease or short-timers attitude, it is known, and then that becomes your legacy inside that organization. Don't let that happen.
Yes, don't let that happen. Okay, if you have a question that you would like Mike to talk about, he wants to hear from you. Mike, how can we send in a question that you might talk about here on the podcast?
So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. One way is to go and find us on Twitter. And it's pretty easy to do that. Simmons_M is my Twitter handle. You'll see me talk about meat and barbecue and the Jets and sales and things that are going on in Catalyst Sale and learning. You can also go to @Catalyst Sale, CATALYSTSALE is our Catalyst Sale Twitter account. We have Catalyst Sale AZ as a Facebook account. You can find us on LinkedIn. It's Catalyst Sale, and that's the singular version of sale. And the last place that you can go to is hello@catalystsale.com. You can send us an email, and we'll respond to those. So you can find us, and we look forward to your questions and experiences and how you apply what we talk about to your jobs.
And if you know anybody that might be in this position where they're thinking about leaving, or maybe you know they should move on and this episode could be a hint, go ahead and share that with them. And if you want, you can always tag us on social media and we'll join the conversation with you. Thank you so much, Mike Simmons, and thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.